course, Johnny Cuba. You can pick up a six-pack of Johnny. Enjoy the Panthers this weekend. Panthers and Lightning coming up Sunday afternoon. Make sure you always drink responsibly. And, of course, don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. And joining us now to help us preview a little NHL Stanley Cup playoffs and, of course, the Panthers, John Buccigross, NHL on ESPN. The Point, you see him doing the games as well. I know you've done a couple of Panther games this year here in Sunrise. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here, John. And first thing I want to ask you about, Butchie Overtime Challenge. What was the birth of it? How did it get started all those years ago?
Just kind of a whim on Twitter one night after I first joined, over about 12, 13, 14 years ago. And that little game we used to play on NHL Tonight back when we had hockey in the late 90s, game would go to overtime. Our show, NHL Tonight, would follow the playoff game. Of course, you don't know when a playoff game is going to end when it goes to overtime. So we all just would throw $1 on the set, pick a couple guys, one guy in each team. And if your guy scored, just take the other $2 from the other guy and start the show. And just a little competition late at night to get through the night. And one night after I joined Twitter, I remember that silly little game and just said, oh, maybe I'll do that. I'll just retweet people, 10 people. I'll retweet people. People love to get retweeted back in the day when Twitter first got started. And I just couldn't believe how quickly it took on. Very simple, elementary game with a clunky hashtag. But people seemed to like it. And then we started giving away T-shirts and selling T-shirts. And it just became a big Twitter kind of a little cultural phenomenon. And I can't believe it's still around. I thought it would have fizzled out by now, but people still get a kick out of it. And I'm still going to the post office and mailing T-shirts.
That's awesome. So, and now you guys, I know earlier this season, you did your version of the Red Zone, essentially. And from what I remember, it seemed to be a huge hit where folks are tuning in. You got all the games at the same time, and you're going from venue to venue, and you're seeing the last couple minutes of each game. It seemed to go really, really well. Is there a chance that we see more of that in the future?
I would hope so. Again, I don't make those decisions. Those are above my pay grade. But yeah, it was one of probably the best positive reaction in anything I've been a part of in my 27 years at ESPN. It was that good. I was a little concerned going in because there was so much expectation. I wasn't sure if it could really pay off. Hockey isn't football. There's a red zone. And so, a team can either score or not score. So that's a win for the defense if they don't. A field goal is probably the biggest letdown of even the red zone. If there's a lot of field goals, that's not quite the same. But, as it turned out, we had staggered starts. The owners don't like to do that. So you have to get you really have to get their cooperation to have staggered starts, or it just doesn't work. They were willing to do that at least one night. It's really up to them if they're willing to do that on these games. But we probably only need, that night everybody played, I think, or maybe everybody but two teams. As long as you have a 12, 13, 14 games, you can do it. You can't do it with 4 or 5 or I think or 8, but it helps when you have a big slate. And there's certainly plenty of nights when you do. So yeah, I would think the league would like it. ESPN would like it. Get a sponsor behind it. It would be, something fun to do again. I'm surprised we didn't do another one after the first one got so much positivity. I thought maybe we'd get one more in the second half, but for whatever reason, it didn't happen. But we'll see next year if we can carve out, maybe even once a month. I think people would get a big kick out of it.
Yeah, it went very well. I hope to see more of it. I do want to get to Panthers and Lightning with you in a moment here, but first, I was following what you were doing on social media yesterday, where you were covering the Arizona Coyotes moving to Utah next season, which of course is always it's the worst nightmare. It's the worst thing that could ever happen to a fan base. You lose your team. I feel so bad for the people there in Arizona. But what struck me was it seems that this is not a relocation. This is like a brand new team. What's the distinction there?
Yeah, it's unique. It hasn't happened before, really, in terms of, it's not a relocation. They're not moving. Arizona is basically dormant. It's not an expansion team because they didn't pay a fee. They just bought all the contracts. So they really did, they in some ways did the NHL a solid. Teams that will get their check, somewhat like an expansion fee check. They'll all get some money, all the other owners, as a result of this. But so I guess kind of like the Cleveland Browns, right? When the Baltimore Ravens went, I guess, the Cleveland Browns were dormant and then they were born again. The NFL is okay. And then we get another team. You'll get one again. You can call yourself the Browns again. I'm sure they'll call themselves the Coyotes again. Their history will stay consistent, however long the gap is, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years, however long it takes for them to find their arena in the right place and build it. I assume then they'll come back. So yeah, it's very unique. Salt Lake City, I guess it's a growing market. Certainly, the owner, Ryan Smith, was talked glowingly about the area, and so it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be good for the league and certainly the players who the players want as much revenue as possible because they are obviously share in that, and selling out that place 12,000 a night until they hope to expand it to 17. That'll certainly grow the pot, and that helps the players and the salary cap and everything.
Terrible for Arizona. I do think it makes sense for Utah, for Salt Lake. I think that's going to be a really good area for hockey there in Salt Lake City. All right, let's talk about the Panthers here. I'm super excited. I mean, I'm a Panther fan my entire life, John, and we are in the golden age of Panther hockey. Finally, after 30 plus years, we got a team these last 4 or 5 years that we could be proud of, where the expectation is every year not just be in the playoffs. The expectation now is win the Stanley Cup. Like, if they don't win the Stanley Cup this year, the season has fallen short. I'm thrilled that they're going up against the Lightning because I really believe, John, I think to win the whole thing in any sport, you got to go through some heartbreak. It's very rare that you put a team together, they break through, they win right away. And it feels right for the Panthers that if they're going to win the Stanley Cup, you got to go through the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yes, for sure. And, they hope to do that this year. And obviously they're built for it. They might be the most built team in the postseason. The way they're constructed, Matthew Tkachuk changed everything. He's the most important Panther of all time, probably, especially if they are able to win one with him in the coming years, whether it's this year or next. He changed the whole attitude, made them a playoff team, playoff attitude, and they came close last year, going all the way to the finals. But this year, obviously, they're not going to sneak up on anybody like they did last year, although they were down 3-1. It's not like they really snuck up on anybody. They just down 3-1, then they just took off and exploded, went on a big heater. So, it's going to be an interesting series. Obviously, Tampa Bay 5-on-5 is not a very good team, but they have an amazing power play, and we know the Panthers take a lot of penalties, the most in the league. And they can't afford to be giving up 4 or 5 power plays and have Tampa Bay score 2 power play goals a game. So the Panthers should control 5-on-5. They should be the better team. They just got to have they like to muck it up. Obviously, you never know when a referee is going to call a roughing penalty for a glove to the face or something from Tkachuk or Bennett or someone like that. So it's a little worrisome because the power play is so good for Tampa Bay and how the Panthers like to play, that you could be feeding a beast a bit. Andrei Vasilevsky is a very proud Russian goaltender going up against another Russian goaltender that really gets his attention. So it's got all the makings for sure. And that's going to be one I'll be watching very closely for sure. But we know the Panthers are built for this, but it's not easy for anybody. It's hard to win this thing. And it's not like basketball or football where these best teams always seem to just get in the finals, get in the championship, move on far enough. Hockey's way different than that.
I've been preaching about Panther hockey down here for years, and it's such a great game. And the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's the hardest postseason. It's the best postseason. And now, finally, over these last few years, you got a lot of people who listen to the show, and they're like, yeah, this is amazing. But for those who are still, I guess, uninitiated, John, can you explain just how great and also how difficult the Stanley Cup playoffs are?
Yeah, you got to win 16 games. And you're playing every other night. You don't get these big 3, 2, 3, 4 days off an NBA team sometimes get. Of course, football players play once a week. It's every other night for 2 straight months, and it's so hard to win those 16 games. And it's so physical. It's so rough. The regular season's not as rough as it used to be. You can kind of cruise through at 80%. Some nights there's some big games that get a little off the rails, which is nice for us fans. But overall, it's a pretty smooth ride. The playoffs is a whole different animal. Some people aren't built for it. Some players aren't built for it. The atmosphere at the arenas is just unbelievable. The weather's getting better. For those of us who don't have weather every day, like in Florida, it's pretty cool this time of year when we start getting some weather. bounce in our step is bouncier. It's just, you feel alive. You feel this feeling of hope and warmth and sunshine and longer days and higher sun. And so it all goes together. And it's just a maddening experience to be inside an arena. And I'm heading to Winnipeg to call the first 2 games of Jets and Avalanche. And those people have their whiteout every year. They go crazy. And so I've never been to Winnipeg or that rink. So I'm looking forward to those first 2 games of that series.
Finally here, John, again, Panthers Lightning Sunday, game 1, 12:30, Amerant Bank Arena here in Sunrise. As someone who's been, you've been covering the league forever, and you see what's gone on here the last couple years. We're pretty much sold out every night. And there were so many years there's nobody in the building. So you're watching on television, you see the crowd, or you're calling games here in Sunrise and you see the crowd. I mean, how cool is it now that you put on a Panther game and we got a great fan base now that supports the team every single night.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just having a team, it's not just having a good team, but it's having an entertaining team as well. That's really the secret sauce for any professional sports franchise. They're not robots, and it's not a spreadsheet. You want humans out there you can connect with and and certainly Matthew Tkachuk and his style of play is very, very irresistible to a lot of fans who obviously sports is popular because it tailors it looks at our emotional side. We're maddening as fans sometimes, and it causes us to say and scream weird things, but that's what it is. That's the emotion of sports, and that's why it's so popular. That's why it's intoxicating. That's why it's addicting. We love that feeling. Some teams are good, but they're not really, they don't have that secret sauce. Again, in Boston, the Bruins have been good, but David Pastrnak and Brad Marchand are interesting characters. So you want characters. Even going back to staying in Boston, the Red Sox, when they finally broke their curse, it wasn't just that they just broke the curse. They had Manny Ramirez and Johnny Damon with hair and David Ortiz, nicknamed Big Papi. It really is theatrical, sports is. So the more characters you have, more interesting characters, like a movie, like a TV show, that's what makes a TV show. And I've always said for the last 25 years since writing about hockey at ESPN on ESPN.com, hockey's a TV show. And that's how we have to look at it as broadcasters. It's a TV show, and it's tailored for television. There's only 19,000 in the rink, 18,000 in the rink. There's a million people watching at home. So our focus should be the TV show and these characters, and the Panthers have characters. And I think that's as big a reason for their success as their wins and losses.
John, tell everybody how they can get their Butchie Overtime Challenge t-shirts.
Ooh, there you go. BucciOT.com. Very simple. BucciOT.com. Got some Melrose shirts coming in today. Barry Parkinson's disease. Just so tragic that he had to retire last year. So we got the Melrose image on a white t-shirt, the Bucci logo on the upper back. They arrived today. They'll be on the website. And of course, we're going to give all those proceeds from Barry's t-shirts and ball markers. So we had little poker chips to the Michael J. Fox organization, obviously, who also has Parkinson's. So try to help our boy Barry out. Hockey people help hockey people. We're going to do what we can for him.
Awesome. Yeah, speaking of great characters, Barry Melrose, best wishes
That's
to
right.
there going through all of it. John, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's going to be a great couple months.
Thank you for having me. Love South Florida.